The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rick DeRico. I'm the Director of Public Relations at Transfinder. We are happy to have another webinar with NYAPT. It's New York State Best Practices, Navigating Uncharted Territory, Resuming Transportation Services. We really have an all-star cast. We see a lot of people are still filing in, so we're going to give folks about a minute. We'll be back in a minute and kick it off. So thanks for joining us. All right, everybody. Welcome to our today's webinar. We are very excited about. We really have just a great group of panelists today. And without further ado, I'm going to welcome NYAPT's Executive Director David Christopher to come on and say a few words and kick us off. So, David, welcome.
Thank you, Rick. How are you today? Thanks for doing this for us. And
absolutely,
we certainly appreciate it. We want to thank all the attendees who chose to take the time to come out today to participate in this webinar. We recognize you're all very busy and preparing for a possible startup. We're unsure yet exactly whether we're going to have a startup soon or not, but your time is valuable, and we hope you get a lot out of this particular session. I'm going to start off by introducing Tony Civitella, the President and CEO of Transfinder, who's going to say a few words before we introduce the panelists. Tony?
Hi, Dave. Thank you again, and welcome everybody. It's been a little while that we've not had a Transfinder NYAPT best practice, so I feel like we're honored and we're so pleased to work with you guys. And like you said today, we have a fine group of people here on the panelists here today. We obviously want to get their insight. I want to learn too, right? What should we expect when school, opens again, right? It feels like we're resuming now, like, right? It's been like this big pause. So I'm looking forward to myself getting things back, even my personal life. Get my son get in school, and so I want to resume life as much as we could. So I'm hoping to hear some good insight, even for myself. I want to remind everybody that all these webinars are recorded. You could see them off our website at transfinder.com. They're anchored there under all best practices. We have dozens at this point. It's recorded. One last thing I want to remind everyone too, that we have a communication tool. It's an app that you could use with your parents. We're offering it at no cost to all of our clients. And of course, even if you're not a client, this offer, you can use this product and it makes sense. Next couple of months, even next month or so, communicate as much as possible with parents, and they also can communicate back to you privately. If you want more information about this product, send us an email at free.stopfinder@transfinder.com, and we'll walk you through what it means for you guys. But guys, I want to get back to NYAPT. I want to tell really Dave, thank you again for partnering with us again. And these have been very important issues really since the middle of March, and it doesn't stop. And the challenges have been there. And I know as a group, as really these teams are put together throughout, not just in the state of New York, but really across the United States, we're going to all work the best we can and figure this out together. So again, thank you, and now back to you, Dave.
Thank you, Tony. Again, much appreciated that you give us this opportunity to partner with you to do these webinars. They've been very valuable to the membership and to others who've signed on, and we certainly appreciate that you've given us this forum. The panel that we've assembled today are all members of the NYAPT Task Force on School Reopening, and they've participated in this work group of this task force since its inception. They each have their own perspective on the issues school transportation operations face in their efforts to resume transportation services in this COVID-19 era. They represent large suburban, small, rural, and school districts, both district operated as well as private contract operations, all across New York State. We appreciate their perspectives and their unique challenges that they each face in restarting their respective operations. Our plan today is to discuss issues relative to the New York reopening guidance that was recently rolled out by the New York State Ed Department and the Department of Health. We also have a list of frequently asked questions that have come into the NYAPT office that we will reference during this discussion. Most likely, we'll not be able to offer concrete answers to some of the questions that arise out of this discussion. There are many unknowns and ambiguous guidelines that we are all struggling with to understand. Rather, we'll offer insights to what we understand the industry is doing in terms of best practices, and we're hopeful in terms of that information, you'll be able to fine-tune your own plan back home. We found that these discussions, these kinds of discussions that have been taking place in local chapter meetings, in task force meetings, and industry-wide are invaluable to our members in their reopening preparations. Please feel free to send in questions for the panel. We'll try to best answer those within this hour, or we'll get back to you via the Transfinder website. Again, thank you for attending. Now I'd like to introduce our members. First off, I'd like to introduce Bill Harvey, who is the Director of Transportation and Safety at Honeoye Falls Lima School District. That's out by Rochester, New York. I'd like to introduce Rich Gallagher, who is the Director of Transportation and Purchasing at Bayshore School District on Long Island. I'd like to introduce Frank Klein. Frank is the Director of Training for the Suffolk Transportation Company on Long Island as well. And Brian, where are you, Brian? I'd like to introduce Brian Trask, who is the Director of Transportation at the Unatego School District in the southern tier of New York. Thank you all for participating, and I'm confident that we're going to have a good webinar here today that's going to answer some questions and bring some information to the forefront in terms of the guidance that has been issued. And last but not least, Rick DeRico. Rick will help run the webinar today, and he's also doing the back office work for the first time, so he may be pulled in different directions. So Rick, thank you for doing this. You do a great job with these webinars. So
thanks so much, David.
So let's start with the question of the day, I think, that most people are probably struggling with, and that's the issue of social distancing and capacity on school buses. The guidance that we've received has changed a couple times, and I think that we're all struggling trying to determine exactly what we ought to be doing out there in terms of the social distancing issue. Each school district plan, I believe, has got that's been sent in, has got some slightly different variation on that. So I guess I'd ask if somebody'd like to take that question on and speak to it in terms of what is your understanding of the social distancing and capacity issue on a school bus? Anybody want to jump on that one?
I guess I'll tell you what we put in. We decided to go with 21. That leaves the seat behind the driver empty and maximizes our space on the bus. Until we get further guidance to load higher, we're going to stay with 21 right now. Bill, you look like you're ready to talk.
Yeah, I thought Brian was talking, but yeah, I'll jump in. We're going to observe the social distancing in every case possible in our department at Honeoye Falls Lima. We're also, we stated in our return to school plan that our capacity in no instance would exceed 2/3 the capacity of the bus. And we will hold a firm line on that. What we plan to do is observe social distancing. A route may end without social distancing, but through the greatest extent possible of the route, we will observe social distancing through strategic seating and arranging that with a route. So we've labeled all of our bus seats, and we'll be communicating with the students where they are to sit as a board. And by doing that through the great majority of a route, everybody will be social distance, and we'll only fill in between, if you will, when we absolutely have to. So this is, I kind of wish that we had the clarity around capacity that we have around hand sanitizer. It couldn't be more clear from SED what we should do with hand sanitizer, right? So I think that the capacity issue is left the way it's left for us to use our best judgment, understanding that we should social distance when not possible, mask or a barrier, right? So that's kind of the way we're applying it, and it keeping in mind that our number one objective is to get students back in the classroom. So that's where we're at. I don't know, Brian, where you're at with it.
Thank you, Bill. We're actually approaching it kind of very similar as to Bill. We're assuring no more than 50% capacity. We did that because we did that across the board as a district. We are planning on 21 to 22 students per bus. We are hoping that some siblings can sit together, which would boost that capacity a little bit closer to the 33 mark. And here again, as Bill mentioned, we're going to the extent possible, social distance. And if somebody does not have a mask on, then we will do what we have to do to make sure that everybody is 6 feet away from them, even if it's doubling or tripling them up for a short distance until we can get that addressed. And if there is going to be more than that 22 or 33 students, it would be for a very short amount of time from the last pickup to the school. So that's our plan as of right now, and let's hope that they accept it and that we can move forward.
Frank, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, we service many different districts. So again, as a company, we would love to see uniformity throughout the districts, but obviously we know that it's not going to happen. But as districts, as our company, as our customers, we will do the best we can to fulfill what they would like. We are recommending 50% adult capacity on vehicles. Again, siblings sitting together. So we're hoping to get to that 21, 22, 23 range on a launch bus. But again, we are a customer service, and we will do what the district asks as long as it could be safe for the drivers, driver assistants, and of course the children.
I got my first question actually from our attendees. I want to again remind the attendees, keep the questions coming. We're going to monitor those and try to get them to this group of panelists as quickly as possible. So Mary wants to know, what if you have a daycare center that has 20 to 24 students, and if they're going to the same house and facility, can they sit together? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Good question.
My thoughts would be yes, if they're kind of cohorted at the daycare location. If I had that many kids going to one daycare, I can tell you that would probably be their own bus. I probably wouldn't mix them in with another busload of kids. And we ourselves have had that situation. So, but we do need to be careful of that. We could treat them as siblings, knowing that they're together, but also knowing that they're wearing masks, right? All the students must wear a mask during the bus ride. So
is there an age limit? Or
yeah, that's a unique situation.
Is there a grade limit? I'm sorry, just so everyone knows, by the way, we're not being rude to each other. Technology, sometimes you kind of talk over someone. So sorry about that, Bill. Is there an age limit anybody have for in terms of when students have to wear masks? I've seen third grade. I've seen younger. I've seen a mix. Anybody have any sense of what you're going to do?
All grades except for special ed kids that have a reason why they can't wear a mask.
Okay. How about you, Brian?
Same. We're doing all students must wear a mask unless there's medical clearance.
Okay.
I believe the CDC had said no one younger than 2 years old should be wearing a mask. So.
Okay. And Bill, same thing with you?
Same thing. All students K through 12, unless they have a medical exemption.
Okay.
Can we just talk about daycares for a second? Because I know a couple of our chapters have been doing some email blasts asking each other about daycare. What is the what are you guys thinking in terms of daycare transportation on alternating days of the week? Are you limiting that? Are you allowing that? You know, lots of times we get into a situation where children go home for a couple days and daycares for a couple days. So what's your plan in terms of that situation?
We're going to delay doing that type of thing until probably the beginning of October. We've kind of decided that we're not going to do childcare right away until we can get this AB day split and see what kind of loading we have figured out, and then we'll add in childcare later. To go back to Rick's earlier question, to me it would depend on the size of the daycare. Like if I go to the YMCA where they're going to be socially distanced there, I would think I have to maintain social distance on the bus. I wouldn't consider them the same household. So I think it depends on the facility that you're taking them to.
I want to piggyback on something you just said, Rich. So, Rich, you just mentioned AB Day. So I want to kind of go through, if you all could give me a sense of what you think, what the opening day is going to look like for you. What is is it a hybrid? And then I want to get into how you're actually handling the transportation in a sense that I know that there's a driver shortage. So one driver making multiple rounds, or what is but first of all, what is the actual structure you're having at your school? You know, changing in bell times, or whatever it may be. And then your approach to literally, I know, Bill, you mentioned you're using the exact same route, no matter what the day, I think is what you mentioned yesterday during our
Yeah.
So can you guys give me a sense of what your opening day looks like? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's all right. So in our district, we're going to go 5 days a week, every day, regular school for grades K through 5, or I'm sorry, K6. The 6th grade is in our middle school. So middle school will be a split. Grade 6 goes every day, 7 and 8 go on an A day, B day. We're calling it a black team, gold team, school colors, but they're going to go for 5 days, 5 days on, 5 days off. On the 5 days off, they'll be remote learning. We're going to do the same thing at the high school, grades 9 through 12. So there'll be a split alphabetically to split them in half. And then the alpha split, as you can imagine, is not exactly equal between the two buildings. So after we did the split, then we went through and we looked at families to group together, so siblings would be on the same cycle, the same black or gold team, if you will. And so what we're going to do, as you mentioned, Rick, we talked yesterday, and our plan is to run the exact same route. We have everybody routed like a normal school day, and we'll just run the same route every week, regardless of whether it's a black week or a gold week. And I think we did that because, you know, the theme of this year is we need to be able to pivot constantly, right? We need to be able to go from everybody in person, maybe to hybrid, maybe to everybody at home distance learning. So we just thought that was breaking it down to its simplest solution, was to build the one routes and run with those consistently every week.
Very good. Somebody else?
We did same thing Bill did, except for we're doing a hybrid as well. We're doing 2 days in person, 3 days remote, A group, B group, group 1, group 2, whatever you want to call it. We originally looked geographically a split, and it didn't really work out, and we're recreating bus routes. So we decided, again, to keep the bus routes intact for several reasons. One, like Bill said, at any point we can switch from remote to full or back and forth. Secondly, we might have to deliver packets of work home to students that are not here for the day, and we can let them know the bus is going to go by their house anyway, so to be out there, we can give it to them. There's also the possibility we might have to still deliver some food or some lunches that we might possibly be able to do. And we all know that it's safest to keep the drivers on the regular scheduled route. They know the kids, they know the road. So for all those reasons, we did that. So we did not do it alphabetically. We did it basically by household, by family, so that all the students K to 12 are coming the same day. We didn't really want to split families up any more than we had to, but the same idea. And so that's how we're doing it. And we're having Mondays as a fully remote / deep cleaning day. And that's also a day that some of our students can come in for some other support services, resource room, service providers, and also a day that they need, if somebody's falling a little behind, we can bring them kids in to work with the teachers individually.
And Brian, there's a reason you said yesterday when we had a pre-meeting why Monday was chosen for that.
Yeah, a lot of districts in the area are doing a Monday, Tuesday, and then they're having Wednesday off, or they're doing Thursday, Friday. And that was our original plan. And we got looking at our district calendar, and the way the holidays fall, there's a lot of Mondays that we don't have school for whatever reason, for holiday purposes or just regular Mondays off. So we felt that there was going to be an inequity there. Sorry. So we chose Mondays to have the day off so that equal number of days, Tuesday through Friday for students, or as close as possible.
Very good. Anybody else?
Yeah, we went to AB days like most of everybody's doing, but K through 12. We found trying to set up our classrooms that we can only get 12 desks in our classrooms, 13 in a couple of them, but most of the rooms can only get 12 desks. So we're going to have to split our student body in half, and A will go Monday and Thursday, B is Tuesday and Friday, and Wednesday will sort of be like if you went to college on an office hour day. The teachers will do prep and work with the students that are behind remotely. We figured that was the most equitable way to split them, and we're splitting them by households so that all the children in one house will go to school the same day. Therefore leaving the high school kids to be home with the younger ones and try and help the babysitting for the families that have two working parents. So we were trying to consider the working parent situation.
Frank, what are you saying in the districts you work with?
Well, obviously my situation is a lot different from the gentlemen that are in this panel. We're going to be doing 1,400 runs for about 20 different districts. So we probably have 4 or 5 different opening days. With that being said, I would love to see uniformity, but I think the biggest issue we have is, one, having districts or our customers tell us exactly what their policies or procedures are going to be, so we can pass that information on to our drivers and driver assistants. No matter how we do it, there definitely will be some conflict out there and issues on the road, and trying to alleviate that the best we can. But information is the biggest thing. So I would urge anybody listening who has a contractor to please pass along any information that's pertinent to this, so we can help you guys out.
We talked a little bit about face masks.
Communication is huge.
I'm sorry, Dave?
It would seem that communication to you is huge because you've got so many. How many students in total do you transport?
Last year we transported about 65,000 a day.
Right, I remember that number from yesterday. So how important it is for the school districts to communicate to you exactly what their expectations are, given the fact that, we've got 3 school district leaders here who all got slightly different scheduling scenarios. So you add, 1,400 runs to that. How complex can that get? Communication's huge, very key.
Well, we've been talking about this. It's been our mantra since the epidemic, really, or a pandemic, that you can't over communicate in this time.
Right.
So we talked a little bit about face masks for students. Go ahead, Rich. You got a question or a thought?
One thing I forgot to mention, our special ed students will be going to school 5 days a week.
5 days a week.
We decided that they need the contact with their teachers more often, so they'll be going 5 days a week.
Very good. So regarding face masks and drivers, I have a question from James, but I got to start off a little bit before James's question, and that is, are drivers wearing masks and/or are those face shields? What's going to be happening in your districts in that regard? I'll start with you, Bill.
Yeah, the drivers are required to wear masks and will be doing so. That said, it is our intent to social distance the driver so that if need be, they can safely remove their mask while operating the vehicle. I know I wear glasses, and if I'm sub-driving and as I exhale, they're fogging over my glasses. I mean, safety is paramount here. So we are going to social distance the driver, but it will not be optional. They will wear a mask when they're loading and unloading and interacting with students, and whenever possible as while driving. But we're not using face shields here. Some people are using a mask and a face shield, but we are not.
Anybody else want to jump on that?
We're requiring face masks on all drivers, and we're not allowing them to wear face shields. I have checked, and as far as I've been able to find out, it is legal to use a face shield, but I think it compromises the driver's vision because of the sides, and it cuts off some of your ability to see on the side. So I'm not going to authorize it for our district.
We've decided that we're not going to allow face shields, mask only. We are going to purchase face shields for all driver's assistants, though, and they will use them.
Anything with you?
Right.
Same thing. Drivers will be required to wear masks, and we put in there in our plan that if an employee requests a face shield, we will provide at the request of the employee.
I want to stick with drivers for a little bit. I'm sorry, go ahead, Brian.
In addition to the mask, not in place of.
Can I just jump in on that, Rick?
Sure.
Just one point, we did check with the feds on that face shield issue, and there is no federal regulation that prohibits a CDL driver from wearing a mask, a face shield. It's a state or local decision, and based on what I'm hearing anyway, most school districts and operators are saying no masks while you're driving a school bus. But to Bill's point earlier, I think there's a notion out there that a school bus driver has to put a face mask on when they board the bus and leave it on until they're done with their bus run. But that's not what the guidance says, right, Bill? You have to wear it while you're in contact with kids loading and unloading. But if you're appropriately distanced and you're driving down the road, you can take it off. Am I correct in that?
Right. The guideline calls for the drivers and students to wear masks at all times while on the bus, implying that while they're together, of course. You are allowed to drive a vehicle if you're the only person on the vehicle without a mask on. So yeah, I've again, they're guidelines. You know, we get them from CDC, Department of Health, SED, and you try and put it all together. That's what we've come up with.
Good.
So I think that would be unrealistic to think that the driver, you know, could drive the entire route safely, especially giving variable temperatures and weather conditions with a mask on.
So my company, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Frank.
Just thinking about that, and I know I've thought about it, and I'm going to advise my drivers to really leave them on. I just worry about the idea of them thinking about taking it off and then going to the next stop to load or unload and then trying to fumble with it again, that the kids are getting on and off and they're not paying attention to what's important. You know, they're worried about the mask and not about what's going on. So I would ask them to just leave it on if they can take it.
So
if they can do that.
I've got two follow-up questions on drivers. I want to start with the one that we got from James, who says, you know, what if the driver has a medical condition and has documentation that says that he can't wear a mask? Or is there an accommodation for that type of person?
I would say you'd have to get your district doctor or maybe your DOT doctor to authorize the exception to what they're proposing. You were cleared to drive after a full DOT physical, and now you're trying to not have the doctor have a say in it. So I would go back to your DOT doctor.
And then you may have to notify parents that the driver's not going to be wearing a mask, I would think.
Well, if I could just jump in on that, we've had some information come into to my attention with a couple districts that had drivers who submitted doctor's notes stating they cannot wear a mask. And the information that I received, and actually one was you, Bill, I think, was basically, if you can't wear a mask, you're not qualified to drive because the state ed guidance says you must wear a mask. We looked into that a little bit because we thought maybe a face shield's an alternative, but it's not. A mask is required.
Nah.
I don't know, Bill, if you want to, you looked in this quite extensively, if you want to jump on that.
Yeah, and my first word of advice to anybody would be to refer to their HR. You know, in any situation like that, we have legal obligations, as you all know, to make reasonable accommodations for employees with different physical issues. I think that, it came down to what is the reasonable accommodation for somebody that can't wear a mask, and there doesn't appear to be one. When it comes to bus driving, it's not a choice, it's not optional. We have to do that for the safety of the students and the staff members. So that was what we came down to. And we did not have to rule on that yet with a specific employee. We were trying to have the discussion ahead of time so that we'd know what our answer would be if and when it occurred. So I don't know if any of the other panelists have come across that.
We haven't come across it, but we had a conversation about it, and so far, I think what we've determined is there is no alternative. So if they can't wear a mask, they may not be able to drive, and which is going to put us in a bad spot. At this point, we don't have a way around it.
Good question. Thank you for that question, James. So sticking with this topic, and I hate to go to a worst case scenario, but one of the questions is that, what's the protocol for your school bus drivers to return to work if one of them does test positive with COVID? Anybody have
right now, for us, what we're being told in the county is a certifying hotline for essential workers that they have to contact, and they'll be tested through them. And if they're cleared from quarantine, if they have it, they receive a letter from the Department of Health allowing them to go back to work. So that's our protocol.
Very good.
Yeah, very, very similar here. Our protocol would be to have clearance from the county health department, but primarily from their physician, their personal physician, clearing them to return.
Okay. Anybody else?
Since Frank and I are in the same county, I agree with what Frank said. We're going to follow the same protocol.
Oh, that's a first.
Same thing, County Department of Health.
So another question here from William, who asks, what is the process to transport sick children back home that have been isolated at the school? Can we put a plexiglass barrier in a vehicle or van to keep the driver safe? Any thoughts on that?
I'll answer that one because we've already been asked that. And our procedure before was we didn't do it, so we're not going to change our regular policy. The parents should be picking them up.
Okay.
We're going to have the parents pick them.
Brian, you had a nice conversation with your chapter about this. Maybe you could speak to that because your chapter dealt with this issue.
Yeah, so in our plan, the plan is to have the parents transport the sick students that have been in an isolation room. And one of the concerns in our geographic area is we do have a lot of parents that either only have one vehicle, or there's not anybody available during the day, or they don't have vehicles. So the question came up is, what do we do with these students? And we can't leave them in school all day. We have to take them somewhere. And where do we take them, and who does it? It's kind of a gray area because now we're going to be asking a driver to transport the student. So one of the things, we reached out to our local health and safety, and the recommendation would be to get some of the drivers fit tested so they could wear N95s. In order to properly wear an N95 through OSHA, they have to be fit tested. So most of our custodians and the nurses in the school districts have to have that already. So we're going to get a pool of drivers fit tested so that if we do have to do that, they can wear their gloves, they can wear the fit test. Probably we would use a large bus. The driver would get off. The student would sit near the back of the bus, drive them home, bring the bus back, and then let it sit for a period of time and then completely disinfect it. I don't have a better solution, but that would probably be the best case scenario if we're required to transport. We reached out to the county's Department of Health that they do not have a unit or a means of transportation outside of us doing it. So that's probably what would have to happen at this point unless we find something better.
Okay. It's almost like there could be a business model for just transporting for this unique segment.
I hope that business model would not be necessary.
Yes, me too. Me too.
But I think the lesson learned here is make sure as transportation leaders, managers, that you have that conversation ahead of time with your district superintendent, administration, because you don't want to be caught off guard with that at the last minute. Because to Brian's point, if you're asked to do that, you want to make sure your drivers are protected. And you wouldn't want to have to deal with that at the last minute versus having a plan in place ahead of time.
So here's a question from April. She wants to know if any district is doing temperature checks before the students get on the bus, or districts that are requiring parents to do them at home before the kids get on the bus. What's your approach to that? Anybody? I'll start with Rich.
We put in our plan that parents would be self-certifying by sending the child to the bus stop or by bringing them to school that they do not have a temperature and they are not sick. We will spot check it at the school, but we are not doing anything on the bus. It's not something that we want to give to the driver. It's just driver already has too much to do to make sure maintain safety. So it's a parent and a school follow-up, not a driver responsibility.
Anybody else?
Yes, same thing. One of the things we did is we reached out to our county Department of Health as far as what we would need for that. The person who takes temperatures has to be completely covered, have to have the face shield, the mask, the gown, the gloves, and they're supposed to change all their PPE between every person they test. That's very problematic for us. So therefore, we are asking the parents to self-certify, and I believe what we decided to go with is actually a ticket system where there's 3 or 4 questions. The parents are going to check them, put a date and sign them, and those students are going to need the ticket to get in the school building. So they will use the ticket to get in the school building. Any student that shows up without a ticket will be directed to go directly to the nurse's office to be checked. The nurse will certify that they don't have a temperature. If they do, everybody will be contacted and we will treat that student as a sick student. I don't know how else you could trust that the parents would do that. We're asking them to do it in good faith. We're hoping they do for our safety as well as theirs. But doing it on the side of the road, we don't feel is really the safest option.
Yep, that sounds good.
What are you supposed to do with them if they have a temperature? You have to take them to school anyway. You can't leave a child on the side of the road. So what's the sense of taking temperature at a bus stop?
Right.
Well, and if you read the FDA regulations on the proper way to take a temperature, the person has to be acclimated to the environment for 2 to 3 minutes. So you'd have to bring them in the bus, shut the door, sit there 2 to 3 minutes. The ambient temperature is going to change, and it's just not feasible. And if you do it, it could probably be challenged, because if the student doesn't have a fever and you said they did, you left them, there's a liability. It's just too much. There's too many variables there to take the risk.
That makes a lot of sense.
So I can tell you that given all that information, there are 2 school districts that I'm aware of that are installing those newly designed scanners on their buses to scan kids as they come on board. And I won't mention their names on this webinar, but if you'd like to call me, I can give you references if anyone's interested in doing that. I'm not recommending it. I'm just telling you it is happening out there, and DOT has issued some criteria on how to install those scanners. So it's just another piece of this.
Yeah, Dave, we tried this with our transit department. When it first started, we bought some of those, not those, but the type of scanner, and we had terrible problems with it. The calibration was not worthy to work, and it just did not work for us at all.
I'll refer those 2 school districts to you, Frank, so they can get updated real world information.
How about sneeze guards? Are sneeze guards approved to be installed on school buses? And are if they are allowed, or any of your districts looking at having them installed?
Are we talking for the driver or for passengers?
I think passengers.
Yeah, I don't know of anybody that has them for passengers. I know of a couple operators that have worked with their regional supervisor through DOT to get approval for a rear-facing sneeze guard for a driver. I don't know of any that have been approved, to the right side of the driver. I know there's OEMs that have DOT options for a barrier behind the driver. So I think that it's on a case-by-case basis. Some folks are pursuing that, and I think you have to meet with your regional supervisor to work through any approvals. And Frank, downstate, down your area, weren't they trying sampling some different configurations of sneeze guards?
Again, in our transit and our paratransit department, we were running through this whole crisis so far, and we did have sneeze guards up in those vehicles. So we modified them and put them on school buses and then had DOT look at them. And we did get an approval through New York DOT, but then, we started worrying about the feds and not having approval for them. And we couldn't justify going through the cost and not being sure that they would be approved. So we did have some mock-ups. I know I did send them out to some chapter members, and but we never pursued it because there's just too much gray area to using them or not.
It was extremely expensive from what I was told too.
And that's another fact. Yes, they were very expensive.
The latest feedback we've received from Jeff Corey at New York State DOT is that they're in discussion on sneeze guards at the highest levels of DOT, but no decisions have been made yet. So.
Going back to one of the points that was made earlier about being fit tested, Samantha wants to know, how does one get a driver fit tested? Anybody have any direction for her?
I would say through BOCES. Most all of the BOCES, health and safety departments have a rep that can come out and fit test your people. Either that or your school doctor would have resource for that, or the county health department. I know that we're providing N95 masks for our nursing staff within our buildings. We have to have, through the guidance and the plans require and good common sense, that we have all the PPE for a nurse. As Brian had mentioned, you might need a gown, a face shield, a mask, gloves, and you might need to change that out after dealing with each individual person. So the fit testing is very important, and I would start with your BOCES health and safety.
That's good.
That's who's doing ours. You have to have a letter from your doctor saying you're qualified medically, and then our BOCES health and safety does have somebody that will come and do it, and they give you a certification, and then you keep that on record.
Perfect.
How long is certification good for, Brian?
That's a good question. I didn't check. I would imagine a year, but I would have to get back to you on that. I believe it's for the year, though.
Going to the buses.
So just for clarity, that's not just a good idea. That's a regulation before you put an N95 on. Is that correct?
That's an OSHA regulation. It may not be a local regulation, but that's an OSHA regulation to wear an N95 properly. You got to be fit tested.
Very good.
Exactly.
Thanks for pointing that out, David. That's good. That's good insight. We talked a little bit about disinfecting buses. Is there an industry standard on that? Is it once a day? Is it after the morning run and the afternoon run? What are your districts doing? And is there an industry standard? Well, David,
Frank, you want to start us off?
If there's an industry standard, and then we can ask from you guys what you're doing at your districts. But David, is there an industry standard?
No, I don't believe there's an industry standard. There's in the guidelines, they talked about disinfecting and on a regular basis. I don't recall the exact wording. Actually, you guys would probably know it closer than I would because you're dealing with it every day. But
so what are you guys doing then?
Carriers are disinfecting daily and high touch areas, after runs. So it's to that point. Yeah, go ahead, guys. You're actually doing it.
As of right now, we're doing summer runs, and what we have them doing is they're doing a regular spray bottle for high touch areas between each run. We've purchased an aerosol spray, a pump aerosol spray that they can do after their routes and spray the whole bus down. And right now, with the amount of buses only going out, we're able to disinfect totally every week. That's our plan, but 1,400 vehicles, it's going to be hard to do it weekly, so we're hoping to do them as many as we can per month. But that's our plan right now.
Anybody else?
We're doing daily. The state requirement was the minimum was daily, and that was their guideline, and so that's what we put in our plan. Although our intention is to do them in between runs, and that's what we're doing on the summer school routes. And we've got same thing as Frank's doing, right? We got some cleaner and wiping down the high contact areas in between trips at the end of the run, having somebody from the maintenance staff go to the bus and disinfect with electrostatic spray gun. And so we're doing that after each trip. And it's really pretty quick and efficient with that electrostatic spray device.
Same thing here. We're requiring the drivers to sweep the bus after every run as part of the post trip and wipe down high touch areas around the driver area. And then we are also using electrostatic spray gun at least once per day, maybe twice, but at least once per day to disinfect the entire bus.
Can you give me a sense? I'm sorry, who was that?
I was just going to say, I've heard of Frank since they do our busing right now.
I just wanted to clarify one thing for my own understanding. Bill, you said disinfecting once per day. That's in the SED guidance?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and I adopted that language, actually, put their expectation rate in our plan. Again, my intention and our operational plan calls for after each shift. So after the morning runs, we'll do them after the afternoon runs. But in my plan, I state we'll do it at least daily.
Okay. So have you guys got a sense, we've been talking about some of the really nitty gritty, which is great because I think that's what people are really hungry for. I'm just kind of curious in general, what the feel is like in your communities from parents. Are you expecting everybody to get on a bus like they did when they left school in June, or when they didn't, not in June, but like last fall? Or are you thinking some parents are going to hold back? And what percentage of your parents are going to say, I want to wait this out before I have my kid get on a bus? What's this, and how are you getting that information? Are you sending emails or taking polls? So give me kind of a sense of what's happening in your community and how you're gathering that data. I'll start with you, Brian.
Okay, so we have done a couple things. We've done a survey initially to see first of all, who might ride the bus and who wouldn't ride the bus. And then recently we did a survey to see roughly how many parents are ready to send their students back to school. And we have about 16 to 17% that really are looking for the remote learning. And it might be a little bit higher because as they hear it's going on. So that kind of forced us to offer a fully remote learning option, which is not something we had originally had planned to do. So we did a survey, we sent letters out to the parents. We asked them to fill out the student's name, and they have to select a learning model, whether it's hybrid or remote. That helps us determine who's going to ride the buses and how we're going to do that. But what we are seeing is it's complete opposite end of the spectrum. We have some parents that say, please get my kids back in school. We need them in school. They need that socialization. They need that time. So we're seeing that. And then the other thing we're seeing is, when you're out in the communities, the kids are not socially distancing. And I do think, they're all friends. They're in the same cohorts. We're going to ask them to separate. But the hard part's going to be managing that. We're going to tell them that they have to. We're going to ask them to. But they're going to naturally kind of flock together. And it's going to be a management piece for sure.
Very good. But parents want to feel at least that you're doing your part as best you can. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Just a sense of what's happening in your community, your parents? Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, we did a survey a couple weeks ago, and we actually wanted to get that information out prior to the district rolling out their back to school plans. But we asked the question, trying to find out how many people would be using the bus, if you're going to be driving your student, or if your student's high school age, they're going to be driving. And quite honestly, we've been gearing up to completely change our parent drop-off areas, hire extra staff to supervise traffic, and ran the metrics again this morning for a meeting with our elementary schools. And believe it or not, we're expecting the exact same number of people to drive their students that drove them last year. I think I was at 16%, and I recognize a lot of the names because we're a small enough community, and I'm at the schools daily, and so I was expecting that we would have upwards of 50% or 40% anyway of opt-out for service, but we're not seeing that, which tells me that there's a level of comfort within the community, and also perhaps a vote of confidence for our department to get them to and from safely. So we're very pleased with that, but unless something significantly changes, we have good support for ridership and folks staying on board the bus.
Very good. Rich, you look like you were going to say something.
We've sent 2 surveys out. The second one a little bit more specific, and we're finding around 20% aren't going to use the bus and are going to transport their own children. Of course, you have to add on top of that the ones that have already contacted the district, which is probably another 10% that don't want to go to school at all. They're going to stay home and learn via the computer, which is an option we had to offer. So maybe 25 to 30% are not going to be on the bus, and we're dividing the kids in half. So maybe we can get away with the same number of buses that we had before.
Frank, anything you want to add?
I know most of our districts put out surveys, and we haven't seen the numbers yet until they start sending us names or routes. But I had a question for everybody, because I know one district did say this to me, and I was curious that they were going to get this survey, and if they chose to opt out, they could not go back in until after the new year. I don't know, was anybody else thinking something along those lines?
We're asking
we ask people. Go ahead, Brian.
We're asking for a commitment for a semester. If they choose 100% remote, we're asking them to commit until the first semester, which would be, I guess, sometime in January.
Right. We're doing the same thing. We've asked parents that if they opt to drive their student or have their student walk or bike to school, that they make that commitment for the semester. And that being said, we know that if they're legally eligible for a ride and if circumstances change and they need to get back on board the bus, we're going to have to do that. So we're doing the same thing with at-home learning. And again, the number I quoted you, 16% was an opt-out for transportation. But as Rich pointed out, some folks will opt to stay home and do distance learning. We've also seen a bit of an increase in homeschooling, but that number is negligible overall. So that's a factor, though, that we have to take into account as well.
I think it's a good idea because you can control what's going on in your department, because if you have a big influx, obviously you need more resources.
Are you changing the structure of your stops, meaning like more door-to-door, so more individualized versus groupings? Has that played a factor in your stops? In your routes?
In my case, we're still using the same guidelines for bus stops that we used before, which is you get a bus stop. If you live, all bus stops will be within 0.2 miles of your home. And we're going to stay with that because walkers still have to walk a half a mile. So,
but I mean, like having instead of having 10 kids at a stop, we're going to spread it out, and that that approach.
We haven't done a lot with that, Rick.
Okay.
And by the nature of our district, we don't have many large group stops. I could probably count them on my two hands, the amount of stops, and we make an effort to have the driver pick them up at different ends of the apartment complex or something to split it down, but very minimal issue for us here.
How about attendance? Are you taking attendance on the buses? If you are, how are you doing it? And are you assigning kids seats for contact tracing purposes?
Yep.
Right now, we're going to take
you want to start?
Manual attendance, and we're not assigning seats.
Okay.
We don't think it's possible to get high school kids to sit in the same seat. When they come out of school, they're going to go to the back and load the bus. And if they have to pass somebody for 10 seconds on the way out of the bus, we think that's acceptable because they're wearing a mask.
Okay. Anybody else? Bill?
Yeah, we're going to take attendance. We're doing that manually. That's a standard part of our day for our K-12 public schools. We take attendance just so we have rider data every afternoon. So everybody's familiar with that. But we're also going to do it on the morning route, and we are assigning seats, and we're giving a seat assignment through their school tool, which is our student portal. And then we're going to export that out of that into our Transfinder, and that way we will be able to take out and run a custom report that'll send home not only the bus number, but the seat ID number the student's expected to use. So yes, on both accounts.
Okay. Anybody else?
We will be doing attendance as well, and we were planning on assigning seats. I'm not sure how we'll assign them yet, but probably it will be through Transfinder would be my guess. Would be the
That
best
would be
way
a
to
good
do it.
suggestion. I would suggest that.
You would support that,
I
Rick?
would support that mission. Frank, anything?
Rick, I'm sorry, Rick. I was going to jump in on that too. And again, it goes back to my feeling that the more you ask the driver to do, the more they're not paying attention to what's going on. And technologies, it could be a big help in that. I know I have some districts like Rich asking about manual. I have districts said they'll use video to see who gets on and off, and then some will just say we'll check who's on the roster and then check the attendance that day. So there's different districts doing different things. But again, I always worry about giving the drivers more tasks than doing what they're supposed to be doing.
I want to do a quick.
Bill,
I'm sorry.
can I just ask, Bill, what student information student system do you have that you're using this student portal from?
Called School Tool. That's the name of the system. It's called School Tool, and we checked, and we can. There's a transportation page in there, and we can actually put the seat ID on the student screen, and we use that to do integrations, imports into our Transfinder, and we pull from that. We pull our medical plans like healthcare plans, allergies, classroom ID number. That's how we print class list. We pull that in and put it into a user-defined character field, and then we can run teacher lists and things like that. So
Right out of,
we're going to manage the seat number the same way.
right out of Route Finder, right?
Route Finder.
Hey, Brian.
Power School does the same thing.
Brian is also the director of technology at his school district. All these guys wear several hats. Brian, would you say that most of the student accounting systems out there have the ability to probably integrate this information?
The three large ones in the state, School Tool, Power School, and eSchool, all do, yes. I use Power School, and we're integrated. I know Bill's School Tool, and I do also know eSchool. I'm very familiar with all three, and they all do have that capability, correct?
Okay, I want to do a final takeaways, and then so we're going to go around the horn. We'll go Bill, Rich, Frank, Brian, and then I'm going to have Dave say a closing comment. I'd like to bring Tony back on, and then I'll close us out. I can't believe how fast the time has flown, but we're already close to the 2 o'clock hour. So just final takeaways. People watch this, but they want to go back to the office. They're maybe going to go to their superintendent or their staff. What is it you want them to take away from the conversation we just had?
I get starting off. You want me to start, right, Rick?
Sure. Yes.
So I guess I would say that to understanding the flexibility of the plans and the variances that are occurring and the value to understanding those, you know, like Frank offers up some thoughts from a different perspective with someone operating, you know, hundreds and hundreds of buses. So we can learn from each other, and I think that's the value of these conversations. I know in our COVID work group with NYAPT, it's been extremely beneficial to me, and I think to the others, to just have those dialogues about what we're doing, what we're hearing, and how we're interpreting things. So keeping an open mind and listening to what's going on out there and applying it how it best fits and serves your school community.
That's great. Rick?
I guess I learned some things like from Brian about the N95 masks. That was very helpful. So I think there was a lot of information shared and some things that I learned. I think we really need to get some definite guidance from the state on the number of students we can have on a bus. We're all being asked to make our own decisions, but as parents talk and more news gets out, I think if we're consistent, it'll be better for the organization and better for school busing in general. And there was something that Frank mentioned yesterday that hasn't been touched on is our drivers are going to be going to your schools. Going to have to make arrangements for them to use the facilities or gain entrance into your buildings. They can't be asked to drive for 2.5, 3 hours and not be able to go to the bathroom. So don't forget the drivers when you're making all your decisions here.
Very good.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's been an issue already. We've had facilities that refuse to let our drivers and driver assistants use their facilities, and that's, you know, a tough thing on a driver or a driver assistant. I guess in closing, we'll go back to communication, as Dave said. You know, in our area, it's the most important tool we have. And I really think about the drivers and driver assistants. The stress level for everybody is way high. And I really hate to see them, the ones out in the front line, take the brunt of this because they don't have the information that they need. So again, everybody out there, please, if you have contractors or with your drivers and drivers, share the information, make sure they're in the know to what the policies or procedures are, because they're going to be tasked out there to push the limits. So please encourage that.
Very good. Brian.
Can't hear you, Brian.
Yep, got it. Sorry. So these guys have touched on it already. Communication is key here, both with the community and with your employees. You know, both in the schools and with your transportation staff. I don't like my transportation staff to hear what's going on from the community or from somebody else. We want to make sure as we get the information out, we communicate it here. We have a couple staff development days at the beginning of school. We're going to make sure that everybody's on the same page. We all know what the protocols are. We get the proper training, and we run some scenarios ahead of time. So we can't hit them all, but if you at least get the minds going and start thinking about how it's going to work when something comes up, you're prepared. You can think outside the box, and you can make it happen. Much easier than, you know, the deer in headlights thing. So I would say just think about the scenarios, think about the things that are unique about your district, reach out to your parents, reach out to your drivers. I'm not afraid to say that I ask my drivers all the time for ideas and suggestions, because sometimes it's right in front of you, and sometimes it just takes somebody to say, hey, why don't you try this, and it works out. So I say do that in this case, because they know the kids is better than we do sitting in our offices, honestly. So that's my advice.
Super. That's great. David?
Well, I heard a couple things. Communication, very important. Flexibility, very important. I will tell you that in terms of communication, we've talked, Rick and I have talked about doing more of these webinars. We kind of slacked off a little bit on the webinars in the interest of people getting busy and ready for school, but I'd heard from people and some members who said, you know, those were very useful to us, just to listen to others in the industry in terms of what they're doing and how they're doing best practices and solving problems, very useful. So we've committed to more of these. We've already scheduled the next one up. So we hope they're useful. NYAPT stands ready to assist in any way we can. I know the bus capacity issue is of a concern. In fact, we have a meeting scheduled next week to speak about that with some state ed officials. So hopefully we'll get more clarity on that matter as time goes by. I can tell you yesterday, the state Senate held the Education Committee held a informational meeting, and the issue came up. So it's out there in terms of you know, trying to clarify exactly what social distancing means on a school bus. We all know that social distancing on a school bus just is not possible. We can minimize the numbers of kids and try to do some things to try to protect kids, and I think everyone's doing that. But true social distancing just isn't possible, because kids are going to pass each other in the aisle, and you know, it's just not something you can do. So we'll work on that, and certainly we'll continue these webinars to assist folks in the industry in any way we can. So
that's great. Thank you, David. I'm going to ask Transfinder CEO to come on screen here. I'll remove myself. That's a good career move, I think. Tony, I'm going to say a few words as we close out.
Great. Well, listen, I learned so much. Thank you, and Bill, thanks for the plug with using our software. I know you guys use our software, so thank you for that. And by the way, we have so many webinars that we're running right now, and actually how to do COVID routes. We actually have it. Make sure that you guys are thinking of all the scenarios. One of my takeaway from just listening to you guys is I think you guys got the operational intact, how to deal with parents, how to deal with drivers and students. One thing I gotta say is that I don't know what the answer would be, is that are you prepared on getting much different phone calls from parents, right? You guys all have tons of calls from all your history and really from being in your industry, all those calls from parents. These are going to be very different calls. So are you prepared? What is your protocols? what's the answer to a mom that's really upset, feels unsafe? You probably never got those kind of phone calls. So I would think, just that's one of my takeaway. I didn't hear that. What's my response going to be when parents call me on these 5 topics? So, I know you guys are thinking about that, but I just don't know if is that something you're thinking about? That's just one of my takeaway.
Well, Tony, I think you just gave us a topic area for a future webinar. So,
because as a parent, I have tons of questions for my transportation department, and so are they prepared to answer it? And by the way, as soon as I feel like you have no idea, then I'm gonna lose confidence as a parent. Yeah. So I know you guys are thinking this, but I just want to bring this up as one of my takeaways.
Well, that's good. And I will circle back with you guys because I know we're going to be bringing you back for future webinars. Thank you, Tony. I want to thank our panelists. You guys were phenomenal. I know that there's so much more that we could cover, and just Tony mentioned one right there. So we'll come back to that. But I just want to thank you because I think, like David said earlier, I think it puts people at ease to realize that they're not in this alone. That you guys are all kind of struggling with some similar things. Include one of the specific ones is just clarity from on high, from the powers that be. So I just think hearing you guys as professionals makes some people feel just a sense of, okay, I'm not alone in how I feel unprepared, or I'm as prepared as I can possibly be for what's coming. So thank you. I want to highlight just a couple quick things. We are going to be continuing to do webinars, and we also do white papers. We have a best practices page that Tony mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, where we've been collecting literally what is the best practices that districts across America are doing to serve their communities, whether you're a client of ours or not. We want every story that we can either do a white paper or have those people featured on future webinars. So if you just send it to mystory@transfinder.com, I can tell you'll probably be on a webinar or in a white paper. So please send that, because again, it's sharing information that's going to help us all get through this, very unique time that we're all in right now. Finally, I do want to say, mark your calendar, because we're going from not seeing you guys in a while to seeing you back-to-back weeks. So next week, August 13th, will be another best practices. It'll be just a follow-through on the topics covered here, and I think we'll probably get to the question that Tony raised as well. So if you could mark your calendars for August 13th, 1 p.m., and we'll be back here again. Until then, I just want to wish everybody a great rest of your day. And thanks so much for what you do to reach your communities. Thanks for all the attendees who really stayed on right to the very end. We really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you next week.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.